Welcome to this special edition of the Safe Money Retirement Show. We are very blessed to have Tracy Kendall Wilson, the Northeast Tennessee Regional Director for Alzheimer's Tennessee, with us today. She's a certified dementia practitioner, serves on the advisory board for the area's Agency on Aging and Disabilities, and she was on the governor's first Alzheimer's task force, and she's been doing this type of work for 27 years. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
I thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I think this is going to give people a lot of really great information and help them. A little bit of personal background. Tracy was actually involved in all of the situation I had with my father. A lot of my listeners know my father passed earlier this year from dementia. Went really fast, and she was directly connected with Melissa and I and my mom and the whole situation and helped us through it. So she's been absolutely fantastic, and we're very lucky, like I said, to have her with us because I think that she's going to have a lot of wisdom that's going to be able to help a lot of you with questions because it's really important. I mean, everyone hopes they don't get dementia, but some statistics right now are showing that more than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's and more than 120,000 just here in my home state of Tennessee. So it's something that's going to affect, if it doesn't affect you, chances are pretty good it's going to affect someone in your family. So having this information and knowing what to look for and all of those kind of things, we're going to go through a whole bunch of that in this. So again, thank you, Tracy. Really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So let's just start with what led you to start working with Alzheimer's Tennessee. What got you into all of this?
So, my grandmother was my first experience with a dementia like illness back in the late 70s, early 80s. Of course, they didn't call it all of the time Alzheimer's disease, but looking back, they labeled it as senility. But with all of the knowledge that I have now, she had Alzheimer's disease for sure, which of course it was discovered in 1906. So it very well could have been labeled Alzheimer's disease back then, but for whatever reason it wasn't. And so I always say, embarrassingly, a couple of the interactions that I had with her as a child were less than stellar. So I think that sort of fueled the passion of wanting to help people later. And of course, now being a little bit older than a child, several other family members have been affected by various subtypes of cognitive issue.
And Melissa, for those of you that don't know, my wife Melissa, she also has her mother passed from dementia. Do you want to tell that story really quick?
Yeah, mom had started showing signs of being forgetful and wandering, and we moved her into assisted living, and she was then diagnosed with dementia type Alzheimer's. And so she lived for about 5 years with it before she passed from Alzheimer's itself. Uh, it was awful to watch. I mean, I think my grandmother, her mother, probably had it. She was forgetful and things, so they called her senile. They call old people crazy senile. So I think it might have run in the family because my aunt passed away and had dementia. So I've watched at least two of my maternal family suffer and basically pass away from it.
Yeah. My grandmother as well, my dad's mom. I never knew my dad's dad. He passed from smoking and cancer when he was young. But my dad's mom, same thing. They called her senile. She was just crazy and did crazy things. And so same thing, but his my dad's brother died from it. And my dad's sister right now, my aunt, has got it so bad that literally just last weekend, my cousin put her in a memory care facility. And
Okay.
she's declining
Mm-hmm.
fast.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
So
I think you bring up a really good point. In the past, it was a little worse, a little more common, I guess I should say, than it is now, but it still does happen quite often, unfortunately, of people thinking that older people just become forgetful to the point that it affects their daily life, and that isn't normal. One of the biggest myths about cognitive issue is it's a normal part of aging, and that definitely is not true, but you both sort of bring that point to light and the fact that it is still a widely held belief, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I deal with clients all the time, sometimes in their 80s, and I've actually got a couple clients in their 90s that are still completely 100% with it.
Right. That's why it should tell everyone that it isn't a normal part of aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what type of services does Alzheimer's Tennessee provide? What do you guys do? I mean, I kind of know because we've been through it, but for the listeners, what kind of services are out there that you guys and, if they're in Michigan or California or wherever they're listening, what kind of services are out there that they can get that would help the situation?
Mhm. I think it is entirely based the answer is gonna sound a little, nuts, but it truly does depend on the need of the person. I think that just realizing there is an organization out there that you can connect with, you're still gonna drive the boat, you are still in control of all, but can help you through some questions that perhaps the medical community doesn't have time to answer, and that is not any negative shade thrown toward the medical community, but we know, especially in our region, we have so many people moving here that the medical community is overworked and we're at a disadvantage with the number of providers. And so it might be something that you're burning wanting to know, but it doesn't fit within the time frame allotted for your appointment. So it can be very basic questions. It can also be direction to a provider that might be a little more understanding or be able to get to the bottom of what is truly going on. We have support group meetings, both in person and virtual. There are some people that just aren't ready to come forward yet, which is disheartening. We want to make sure that they feel support. And while we're somewhat hesitant to talk about it, then we can't get the full support that we would normally be able to. But trying to get them to that point. We provide home visits with education and consultation. Sometimes those things are exactly the same thing you can do over the phone, but people feel more comfortable sitting down in front of someone and talking through things. Family meetings and sort of wrangling together, very seldom does a large family all have the same idea about what's going on or what can be expected? So I think just getting everyone in the same room cordially
Hmm.
and sort of facilitating
Hopefully,
that. Yeah.
right? That's the plan.
Now I've been involved in some. I'm from Carter County, and initially a Yankee, so very little scares me. But we have had some situations where we've had to get a family to that point. So, advocacy, we provide research funding, you name it, and there's probably something that will fit into what a family needs.
And one of the big things that helped my situation specifically is caregivers and getting caregivers. So without going into too much personal detail, basically my mother wanted to completely take care of dad. And I get that. And I appreciate that. They'd been together for, 800 years. So I totally get that she wanted to take care of him. But there comes a point, no matter how strong you are and no matter how much you want to take care of someone, there comes a point where you need some help.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
feel I feel like people see it as giving up or kind of throwing up a white flag.
right.
And what I try to say is that if you think about all of the jobs that people are compensated for that go into being a caregiver. So you're an attorney, you're a CNA, you're a personal errand runner, you are a professional shopper. You have so many roles that are uncompensated, and you also didn't receive the training for them. So why should you expect yourself, just because you love this person, that you're capable of doing all of the jobs? Your relationship is totally separate from a role. So
Yeah.
it's getting people to understand that.
Yeah. But I mean, it was huge for us when my mom finally made the decision and the commitment to bring in someone. And it made all the difference because it gave
Yeah.
her, I mean, even at the beginning when it was only a couple hours a day, well, that was a couple-hour break, because otherwise it was kind of like you just said, it's a 24/7 job. Because even when dad was sleeping, there was times where he would get up and wander around and do sometimes crazy stuff at night. She'd have to be awake and then that interrupts her sleep. She basically really didn't sleep well for 3 years because she was taking care of him. And so just in my opinion, I think that's one of the biggest things is getting the help that you need, whether it's someone just to sit with a family member, whether it's bringing in someone to do some extra PT, to get them moving, because sometimes that helps with, just any of that kind of stuff. And I know that you guys and all the other organizations are so good and so plugged into all those kind of things.
Right. You again bring up a really good point in that if it's something to do with care, and in all of those examples you gave, those are care helps. You would anticipate that, you would sort of expect that coming from a provider. And, especially with primarily now, there are children living with a cognitive issue. And so it's not only older people, but that age range, especially if the doctor said it, I'm going to do it. If the doctor or nurse practitioner or PA doesn't say it, then it's not real. And
Right.
so there are many times that you are the one, we are the one mentioning therapy and those types of things when, that is predominantly something that comes from a primary care provider. But again, they have limited time. Even the most caring, wonderful providers have limited time because they've got 50 other people in your position that they're waiting to see.
Yeah, and probably more than that. That's being
Yeah.
that's being nice.
That's being
Yeah.
generous. Yeah.
So, with what you do specifically, what does a typical day look like for you? I mean, I'm guessing it's completely different based on what's going on, but if you were just to say an average day, it's meeting with someone, it's helping get with the doctor, it's helping get them, what kind of outreach, what a normal day looks like.
A normal day, as you kind of said, looks different on the day, depending on the day, but I would say almost every day includes a home visit or a consultation, pretty in depth with a family or families. I am not I'll use a really professional word right here and say I'm not a cutter offer. And so I truly will let people most of the time talk as long as they need to, and so I try not to book one right up against the other because then I wind up in some trouble. But I would say working directly with families, we do have 13 support groups in the region. So it usually does include a support group or two, and then lots of phone calls. So I would say that an average of about 25 to 30 calls a week are what come in to just our region. And that can be someone who is following up with something, seeing if I was able to get them a doctor's appointment or get a referral through to someone, or a brand new person who's moving their loved one here from across the state, and they need to know how to get them here and where they're going to go once they come here while they're looking for an apartment to live in the community. So those are real examples. So very, very few phone calls are 5 or 10 minutes, and so a lot of phone time.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, I mean, pretty much all of the different areas of the country should have someone very similar to Alzheimer's Tennessee. So someone that's listening from Georgia or Florida or wherever, there should be an organization or multiple organizations that are very similar to Alzheimer's Tennessee in their area. What's going to be the best way to find it? Just Google?
Google is a really good way to start, and I always say start out with the local area agency on aging and disabilities. That is a federal program, and they all have to provide a core group of services. Organizations like ours tend to be more independent, sort of state-based organizations, minus the telephone. I think that there are other organizations that you would be able to access, someone at a call center that would be able to get you through a crisis moment. But for some of the in-person, in-home, definitely, that's going to be more independent. And so I tend to steer more toward the area agency on aging and disabilities.
Um, Tracy, how would you explain Alzheimer's in simple terms? Like, and then maybe what the difference is between Alzheimer's and dementia?
Okay. I think for the majority of people, Alzheimer's disease is going to start off as simple short term memory loss. And that's the challenging part because we all forget things on a daily basis, right? So, yeah,
Yes.
do we forget and then remember that we forget? Does the forgetfulness affect our life on a grand scale from day to day? And if the answer is no, then it may be something a little deeper than just normal forgetfulness. The number of times that I'm almost home and I remember that I was supposed to stop at the store and pick something up is it, you can't even count or
Every
number. It's like the
every day.
stars. Yeah.
Every day.
So does that affect our daily life? And if the answer is no, then it probably is something that we just have to have a little more grace with ourselves and write a note before we leave the house. Now, I will say what is not as commonly known is there is a atypical type of Alzheimer's disease that starts out more personality based changes. And that's what people really can't handle. Most people expect all dementia subtypes to have some connection to amnesia. So the forgetfulness, you forget things, you misplace things, those types of things. And there are so many more people that are experiencing types that have nothing to do with forgetfulness, especially in the beginning, but they're very personality changing based. And that really throws people off, especially in a culture sometimes that we're just looking for people to do the wrong thing. So I will say the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia technically is not a diagnosis. It just explains a group of symptoms that can include forgetfulness, but not always.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My mother's personality changed. While you were saying that, I when we went to move her from Florida to South Carolina in assisted living, she would be happy one moment and then 20 minutes later she'd be sad, super sad, and 20 minutes later she'd be super angry, and that was not my mother. My mother
Right.
was mostly a joyful person unless one of her children did something bad.
Yeah. And then
Um
ready to tell you about it.
and then she
Yeah.
was pointing her finger at you and she was angry as all get out, but
Mhm.
she would just up and constantly up and
Mhm.
down 24 hours a day,
Mhm.
and I didn't even it never clicked until you just said that.
Mhm. And like I said, I tend to see people now, don't get me wrong, when someone forgets, they've asked a question and they've asked us the same question for the 12th time, there is some stress that is involved in that. But what I can say is when it's this person that you've had this wonderful relationship or not with throughout your life, that all of a sudden you're walking on eggshells around them, that causes a lot of stress. And so, what I see people, to go back to Tim's point of getting help and that not being giving up, I think so many times, whether we get help or whether we don't, hinges on physical things that the person is still able to do or not able to do, when our mental health and burnout should absolutely be factored into that. And when you've got a person that's swinging like a pendulum back and forth, which is very common, that is definitely when we can use some help to sort of diffuse that situation or to get the attention taken off of
Yeah.
us.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about either dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever? I mean, what are the things that you hear that just every day make you go, "Oh my god, this again?" So what are some of those things?
It is inevitable, I think, is one of the biggest things. I'll have a educational booth out somewhere, at a health fair or at a give back night at a restaurant or something like that. And people will look at my tablecloth and be like, ugh. I've gotten that reaction before. It's like, I don't want to know anything about that.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's inevitable. I get a lot of comments like, well, I'm 86. Sort of what do you expect? And well, not dementia, not Alzheimer's disease, because it's not guaranteed. Also, if we don't know about it, it will not affect me. So I'm not going to research it. I'm not going to know a little bit about it, because if I don't know about that, then it's not going to affect our life. And I think the other biggest thing is that everybody with a dementia is going to get ornery. I'll use that word since we're in Tennessee. I've had people ask me, when will my husband get to the angry stage? And what I really like to tell people is there is no angry stage. There can be a dementia behavioral expression that is anger, but 86% of the time, the root of that can be changed very easily. And so there's no stage where a person gets angry or difficult to deal with. And I think that's the other big thing that people really think, but need to know that it's not real, because that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of trouble and heartache before that is necessary.
And that reminds me, another one of the things that people think, if I just don't research it, that's not gonna happen, is long-term care. People
Yes.
on this show hear me talking about long-term care all the time, and over 70% of people are gonna need some form of long-term care in their
Yes.
life, but yet people just want to ignore that I don't think about it, it's not gonna happen to me.
Ignore it, and I'm sure you all see this a lot as well, they're misinformed at who pays and when.
Oh, yeah.
The number of people that think Medicare, because Medicare is a great product
It is.
sometimes. Um,
Overall, yeah,
yeah,
overall.
yeah. And it does pay for a lot of things without a whole lot of question or a lot of appeal, those types of things. But in a very small nutshell, which I'm sure you expound on all of the time on your show, Medicare doesn't pay for custodial care, and I think a lot of people still think it does.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, there's
Mhm,
no part of long-term care that's covered under Medicare.
mhm.
That's one of the
No.
things people hear me talk about all the time because they think it does. All
Right.
just, so anyway, yeah, that's so is that all the big misconceptions that you hear, or are there really anything else?
The big ones, I would say the big ones, that kind of covers a lot of them.
Okay.
What are some of the like early warning signs that families overlook and miss? Do you think it's the confusion? I mean, when mother was diagnosed, I got super hyper aware of things that I would forget. And then I heard someone say, everybody loses their keys, but when you find them, do you know what they're for?
Mhm,
And do you know that you've lost your keys?
mhm,
That's the difference.
mhm.
So I kind of, when I write stamps on my grocery list 4 times and forget stamps, which happens quite often, I'm like, okay, I'm just overlooking it. Like I'm not afraid that it's anything. But are there any like just a couple specific things that people overlook in their loved one?
I would say the main 2 are exactly what you mentioned. So forgetfulness that all of us have. Because how do you separate outwardly someone who is forgetting like we do every day because we are overwhelmed, we're not paying attention, we have too many things going on in our mind at the same time, to something that is a true cognitive issue. So I would say that, and I would also say those mood changes that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier. There are a lot of people that think, and forgive me because I do not speak like this, but there are a lot of people that are just under the delusion that old people get mean. I have heard that before. And what I will say is we all lose our von economo neurons the older we get, and that is what makes us a empathetic good person. So that is true. As we age, we do begin to lose our filter just a little bit, but not to an extreme amount. So I would say, what is normal for that person? If you have a person that you didn't talk to on the phone all day, every day, and now, or if you did speak to them on the phone and they're keeping you on the phone for hours, 35 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour, that is a change. Now, don't panic. There are also a lot of people that discover as time goes on, these relationships need to be cultivated. But I will say, people don't change drastically in their older age.
Yeah.
And that's one of
Okay.
the things, as you know, that happened to my dad was
Oh, yeah.
the change in his attitude and the things he did. I mean, it was obvious that there was some sort of a major issue. It wasn't just, like my beautiful wife here goes to the store all the time with stamps written on the list and then comes home without stamps. That's different than,
Right.
thinking than not knowing what a stamp is for. Kinda like, that
Right.
like we were saying, not forgetting your keys,
Right.
forgetting how to use the keys,
Right.
forgetting what the
Right.
keys are for. And yeah, that
Right.
that happened with dad a lot. That and then
Right.
just his well, you saw it. You saw how his attitude and his everything just changed. I mean, and he
Mm-hmm.
just almost went blank, kinda like a
Mm-hmm.
zombie
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Or anxiety, a person
Yes.
who is now anxious and pacing when that wasn't their attitude before. Women, especially after menopause, we're definitely not changing that much mentally and psychologically. And men, it's a little earlier than that. Once you're through, for the most part. Now there are always, the outlier that is a little bit different, but late or major personality changes later, that late in life, those aren't those aren't common.
Yeah, Tim's dad would do puzzles. Like for Christmas, we would buy him puzzle books because that's what he loved to do. And then he all of a sudden just wasn't doing them. He didn't have any interest. He didn't want to do read his books or read music and all the things that it was I wouldn't say it was sudden, but it was very rapid.
I think when the big thing, because things are happening behind the scenes that we just don't pick up on because they're normal. But then when that first major thing happens, I think that's why we tend to think that it is a little more faster progressing than it actually is. Now, it very well could be that. I also think the majority of us, when we forget something and it's brought back to our attention, like the stamps, not to pick on you again,
No, it's
but when
me.
you
It's me.
you're the problem, it's you. When that gets brought to your attention, it's not, I wasn't supposed to get stamps. You were supposed to get them, or you didn't tell me that. And I think that is the main difference. We remember, for the most part, what we forget, and they don't.
Yeah. Oh, I remember them
Yeah,
when I'm in the car driving
right,
home from the store.
right. And you're thinking, I'm not going back to do that. Yeah, no.
Okay. Next question is, what are some of the most common challenges the caregivers come to you with? So what are the things that you hear, the horror stories that, that the caregivers are coming back to you saying, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you about, Bill and what happened with him." What are some
Mhm.
of those things you hear?
Probably the most common, and this is unfortunate because I feel that we would get to this point if people would be a little more open earlier on. I get a lot of, I can't do this anymore. And I think it is because they've been running the marathon without someone to hand the baton off to. And so I think planning ahead of time would help with that. But I would say one is just a very generic, I can't do this anymore. I got two of those yesterday, one from Southwest Virginia and one from somewhere else. And so that's a very common one. We've gotten to a point, we're at an impasse, and emotionally, I just can't do this anymore. I will also say that a lot of caregivers feel very isolated, again, because no one can do whatever they're doing as well as they can in their minds. And so it's overcoming the I have to do or I am failing attitude, or outlook or perspective, whatever we want to call it. I'll take back the word attitude because that connotates a negative statement, but I will say thinking that they have to do it all, just being worn out mentally, physically, and mentally is probably the biggest challenge that most caregivers come to us
And
with.
emotionally and spiritually too, I'm sure. I mean, just
Yes.
being around my dad, as much as I loved him, in that last year was just for me draining,
Right.
and that was
Right.
my own dad. And it was
Right.
just draining because I know how he used to be. And,
Right.
I can remember playing sports with him, and now he can barely get out of the chair and he can't remember
Right.
how to get to the bathroom. And
Right.
just simple things, and it was just
Right.
draining. And I'm sure it's the same way for caregivers because they develop an emotional attachment to that person because they're
Absolutely.
around them so much. They have to.
Absolutely. And I think, perspectives of additional people and other family members. As a child, my mother developed vascular dementia prior to her death. Children have a different perspective than spouses do. The relationship is different. And so we are, for the most part, and this is a very big blanket statement, but I will say for the most part, most children are get in there, make a decision, carry it out, get it done. And now that's not to say we're cold. We just we're removed a little bit more. Spouses, it's much, much different. I told them I would never do this. I made all of these promises. Our vows were in sickness and in health. And we've really had a misguided idea of what those actually mean. And so, again, sitting down and talking with someone who won't be pushy, maybe even joke about how children are a little pushy and bossy. I've been known to do that sometimes, and getting them on your side to then let them know that you have no vested interest. You just want what's best for everyone.
So, to reiterate that, probably looking for assistance or reaching out to the Agency on Aging and Disabilities would be probably one of the things you would recommend to people who are starting this whole caregiving journey for
Yes.
someone.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then that it would give them direction. I mean, I know that when you met with us the first time, it was basically because we were like, we don't know what to do. My experience with my mom was completely different because we moved her into assisted living because nobody could take care of her. And so Tim's mom wanted to care for his dad. So we needed help. We didn't know where to go or what to do.
Right. I think as much as humanly possible to do the investigation before you need it. And that is truly what I try to encourage people to do. I will say, you may never pull the trigger, you may never need this, but I can tell you the amount of room for guilt and additional grief to grow when you have to make a decision in the moment. You've not done your due diligence. You don't know what you would want when and if the time comes. Now, there shouldn't be guilt or additional grief then because you're doing the best you can in the moment. But I can tell you a lot of people do have that. So, having the answers in case you're faced with the question.
What or if there is anything, I guess I'll put the question that way, is there anything as far as research going on into dementia, Alzheimer's that you know of being in this quote unquote industry that gives you hope? What do you think the outlook is 10, 20, 30 years? Let's kind of transition and talk about that. What people can do, what the outlook is, what the new treatments are, just that kind of stuff.
So, when I started doing this work 27 years ago, there was a deadline. And believe it or not, you think everything is so far away. And then as time goes on so quickly, it's like, wow, we're here. It was 2025. In 1998, we were given the year 2025 that if there wasn't a cure or there wasn't a way to significantly slow down the disease or modify it in some way, that it would bankrupt the federal system of Medicaid, Medicare, those types of things. So we're in 26. We're a year beyond that. And what I will say is in 2024, we had the first disease modifying agent. So there was the terminology, which was incorrect prior, but people used it nonetheless, that we had the cholinesterase inhibitors, the donepezil, and the others that would slow the disease progression. It never did that. It sort of masks symptoms of the disease and in best case scenario helped the person function better for a longer period of time because it protected the acetylcholine. And then in 2005, we had the glutamate uptake receptor helper. And so that sort of helped things like communication, personality, those types of things in the best case scenario. But in 24, we had the first medication that actually decreases some of the plaque and then halts the buildup or at least slows the buildup. And that had never happened before. So we had an advancement. The downside is it is appropriate for a very small group of people, people that are sort of caught very early on, have no significant risk of brain bleeds, those types of things. And as time goes on, we see more of those agents that are a little more widely available to people without as much of a risk. So that's what we see. We also see, based upon a lot of research, that it may be more like a HIV form of treatment. So there's not one medication, there's a cocktail of medications and then lifestyle factors that would play into the lowest possible risk of developing dementia as possible.
So the hope is basically to make it chronic, something like HIV now, that if you take this certain cocktail, you got to take this pill, then this pill, then this pill,
Yep.
and you do that, that you should
Yeah.
be okay, and you can something that you can live with. That's the
Right.
hope.
Right. And I mean, did you think in when was that? Late 80s, very early 90s, when HIV was a death
It
sentence.
was,
And now, I mean, Magic Johnson,
right?
which of course, his financial resources back then probably played into that a little bit. But you also look at Michael Fox living with Parkinson's
Yeah.
disease for the number of times. So I think as more people are affected, I know that the federal government is pushing toward the cure, or at least an extreme treatment option, because what they also have discovered is the largest um, age of onset, which is 85 and older. If you could push the disease out for additional 10 years, the majority of people would succumb to something else versus a cognitive issue.
Be interesting. So
Yeah.
you're basically saying we're hoping the future of Alzheimer's is like HIV was, or it is now, like you take several medications and you adjust how you look at things and do things. And boy, that would be fantastic.
Diet,
Diet,
movement,
exercise,
social connections, social
social
connections.
is huge.
Being a social person, even on the periphery, there's something called secondhand socialization, and that is where we literally could go to, say, the mall, full of crowded people, never have one conversation, but stay involved in, people call it people watching.
Yeah,
That actually does provide some benefit. Now, obviously, sitting down and having a conversation with someone also works much
right.
better, but it's interesting to know that we don't have to be. Think about my husband being a somewhat non-social person, really having to go and be in the thick of some crowds, whereas I will talk to a wall. So we're
And
good.
anybody all the time. I love people watching, so I'm
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
And that's one of the things actually that I also talk to people, not even talking about the dementia part, just in retirement, is keeping that social element. Because the last thing you want to do is retire, sit on the couch all day, watching TV and not talking to anybody else. That's a, that is a formula for you passing.
Disaster.
Yes,
Disaster.
quickly.
Disaster.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I've seen it. I mean,
Uh,
we've all seen it. You've
Right.
got to stay active and you've got to stay connected, whether it's your church, your family, groups that, for whatever. But you've got to have that social part.
You bring up another really good point, and I know it doesn't really have anything to do with dementia, but I see this a lot. People do not plan for retirement. People our age think to the day where we don't have to be somewhere at a certain time. We could travel more, we can spend more time around family, and that is because we're not forced to do that. When people are taken out of something that they've known for the past 50, 40, 50, 60 years. That is such a huge part of who they are. I see a lot of depression in people just upon retirement because they don't have a what's next. They just expect life to be great and wonderful, and we can do all of these things now that we didn't have time before. I don't see that playing out a whole lot unless a person does exactly what you said. Have a plan and build that plan out just the way they did their working career. And secondly, and this goes back to caregiving also, um, no two people, no matter how much they love and care for one another, need to be with each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Agreed.
That is a
Agree.
Yep.
I
that is a
100 It's not good for anybody.
it is not. It is not. It is not.
I think one of the best things my mom and dad did when they were retired, they were living in Pennsylvania. They sold their house, moved to Central Florida into a retirement community. It was the best thing for
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
And I mean, social and people and neighbors and dances and picnics and pool. And then when my dad passed, my mom stayed there, which was fantastic for her because she was surrounded by this
Mhm.
community they had built.
Mhm.
She was surrounded by people who had experienced losing a spouse. And my other siblings were like, what's mom going to do? Where's she going to go? And I'm like, she's staying right where she is.
Mhm. You bring up the best point ever, whether it's caregiving or just life in general. If we make one person our entire focus and purpose of living because we feel like we need to, have to, they require it, and that person is no longer there, what happens on either side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom said if they had stayed in Pennsylvania and daddy passed away, what was she going to do? Sit in that house?
Right. Right.
And that's one of the things I'm thankful for is that my mom is still in a community
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, after my dad passed, is it awful? Yes, but she still goes to lunch and dinner with her friends almost every day, and then every night they all get together at like 6:30 in this common area, and they sit there and talk about what's going on with you, and oh, my daughter did this and this, it gives her that community because could you imagine if she was just in an apartment by herself?
Right.
And
Lonely.
I've got a good friend of mine that I talk to quite often whose dad passed from dementia a year before mine, so last year, and his mom is still living in that house by herself. She won't go anywhere else. She just stays in the house all the time, and I've talked to him about it, and he's like, "I try to get her to do things, but she isn't interested. She just wants to stay home." So, and that's, I can see, and he knows she
Right.
needs to.
Right. Right.
So,
So at that point, being treated for depression, there's also a huge stigma tied around anything to do with mental health, even though dementia we know is not a mental health issue, it's a cognitive issue. But getting treatment for all of those types of things. So we do have a little desire to sort of rejoin community when we feel like our world has been rocked or, shaken to the core.
what would you say, and I know it's somewhat different with all the different locations around the country, so it may be a little different in Georgia and Florida than it is here, than it is in Michigan, than it is other places. But specifically for Alzheimer's Tennessee, and then more so nationwide, what would you say that the listeners could do to get involved and help? What would be something that all of these organizations need? I mean, do they need volunteers? Do they need money? Do they need supplies? What can we do as a group of listeners to try to help this whole
Global
situation?
phenomena.
Yeah.
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 I would say number one, be kind. I will explain that in a nutshell. I think that, we are somewhat living in a time where we're looking sometimes to have problems, and it doesn't take too much to find one. And so I think if someone in the community as a whole interacts with us in a way that is less than stellar, it could be a dementia. It could very well be a personality, behavioral expression due to a dementia. So just have a little more kindness, I think, for the community as a whole. There are research centers across the United States that are always looking for individuals to participate, so we can have those wonderful treatments and technologies as time goes on. So look those up. They're very easy to find. Dementia research centers, Alzheimer's research centers, and those should be worldwide, not only, within the United States, in case we have a, listener from Congo or
You're right.
something. But we can, even as a healthy person, you can be involved in research. And then know where the helps are when someone comes to you and discloses to you that they're struggling, whether you're a boss and you have an employee that's not been working at the level of efficiency that they've been at their entire career. It may be because they've been up all night caring for a loved one living with dementia. So know where the opportunities are to turn to people or turn people to for help. I think every single nonprofit organization needs more money, more volunteer service, and then more awareness spreading. So I think those definitely are all great ideas. But I think if you want to create the world where Alzheimer's disease is a memory, that looking up those research centers would be a great idea, somewhere to start.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. This isn't actually on the questions that we've got, but this just came to me. So if it was, I own my company. So if one of my employees started showing that, or someone's listening and they think their spouse is starting to potentially show signs, what's the best way to broach that subject? I mean, if you've been married to someone for 40 years, I mean, the whole 40 years you've told them they're crazy because they've done crazy stuff. We all do crazy stuff all the time.
Mhm.
But saying you're crazy and saying you might have a problem and need to see a doctor, those are two totally different things. How
Right.
do you suggest, whether it's a boss or it's a spouse or it's, a child or whatever, how do you broach that subject and not start a war and then, get that person into getting some help? What's the best way that you've ever found to kind of get that going?
So that is somewhat a loaded question, and I will give an answer that I'm fully aware not everyone will agree with, but I am collectively thinking about both my own family's experience as well as the past 27 years of working with families. So use that as a lens to listen to this answer. I have two.
Okay.
The first one is you know your loved one, you know your employee, you know whoever it is, the person you're concerned about, you know them either better than anyone else or fairly well enough to realize there is an issue going on. So if you or a person thinks that it would be a non World War III to broach that subject, I would start with the question of, I would like to discuss something with you that may be emotionally charged. And I know that not everybody is going to use that language. So however you would translate that in your common speak with this person. Have you noticed you are having issues with XYZ? Or do you feel you are having any hiccups with XYZ, and then see how the conversation goes. I will tell you there are a lot of people that think their loved one or their friend is in denial when it is actually something called anosognosia, which means the person is unable to self-reflect. That is totally different than denial. So that's going to give you a pretty good indicator as to where the person is in the progression. Now, this is the more controversial take, and that is you discussing, especially if it's a family member, it's a little easier, discussing that with a primary care provider confidentially, knowing that HIPAA means they can't give us information, but we can share information with them. Now, I totally understand people have the right to be involved in their medical care, but if the person is experiencing a disease state that sort of forces them to not be able to self-reflect, we can talk to them for days and hours and months and years and them still not quite grasp it. So that would be one. And then in a lot of work situations, I have known supervisors to reach out to the spouse or the parent or whoever the closest person to them is. And so I think you have two ways to go.
Okay.
So, Miss Tracy, what keeps you motivated to keep doing this work? Because I know it's emotional, I know it's stressful, and I know sometimes it's probably overwhelming. What keeps you motivated?
My honest, true answer is this is my ministry.
Gotcha.
I genuinely believe that that was given to me for this time. Now, I don't bring that into my work, so I can work with anyone. We don't discuss those types of things, but just that's what I know
Right.
motivates me. And then more on the human side, it's that I know people are struggling. I may care about people, but I don't have the intimate connection that the person reaching out to me does. And so I can help and guide and love and care, but it's a little removed, if that
There's a
makes
line,
sense.
like a
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Int I get that.
Yeah.
I think you kind of already touched on this, but if you had the ability, the superpower to change one thing about the perception people have of dementia, Alzheimer's, what would it be? What would be the thing that you could reach down their throat and say, no, that's not right, and change the perception to things that are true?
It's not contagious, so we don't need to ignore the person.
Okay.
I see a lot of people that just don't know how to interact, so they don't interact. And what I try to educate is we interact the way that we always have with them, and then we gauge what they're capable of doing. Many people are very capable for a very, very long time. And I think that would be one thing. And then, secondly, is that the worst is going to happen tomorrow. I think that there are progressions on record right now of 27 years, which looking at that, you know that the progression was very slow and very gradual. And so if we could just live in the moment, not think about what's going to happen 10 years from now, our life could be a lot better. So I think it's not contagious. Don't write people off. Don't treat them differently because, again, it's not contagious.
As a piggyback on that, again, this isn't on the question list, but what about families? Like, for example, Mitzi and I both have direct family members that have had this. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have it either, right? I mean, that's not something that we need to freak out about because just because my dad and uncle and aunt and grandmother had it and her mom had it doesn't necessarily mean either one of us are going to have it. How does that work? How does the family relationships work as far as getting it if your family had it?
So I will say that true genetically linked Alzheimer's disease is not as common as a lot of people think. Family history does increase risk, but there are so many risk reduction research studies out there right now that have been tried and true and proven. Olive oil is magical. It truly is for just so many brain health prevention methods. So family risk or family history does increase risk. However, our lifestyle and what we do also plays into it. So, is it a guaranteed? Absolutely not. They're even saying now that having, the famous gene that came out about a decade and a half ago, the APOE, and how if you had four, you were going to get Alzheimer's disease. Now they're really looking at that as well because we can have it. We don't know what sort of flips the switch. And so they are thinking that lifestyle, all of the things that we talked about, keeping our brain healthy, keeping our heart healthy, all play into that.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, what I would kind of like to do is just give you on the end of every one of my shows, I do what's called the last word and just kind of recap. So I kind of want to just give you the last word in this. A couple other statistics I want to throw out before I do that. Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. and one half of seniors die with either Alzheimer or some other form of dementia. So, this is obviously something that everyone needs to pay attention to, be prepared for. So, what would you say as we wrap this up today? What would you say is the last word for someone that's listening and may be scared, may be concerned for their spouse, their mom, their dad, themselves? What would you say as the last word for someone that's been doing this for 27 years and is an expert in this field? How would you want to wrap this up for them as they're listening?
Okay. I would say that no matter where the listener is from, the direction, the emotion, the feelings behind something may be happening to me or happening to my family member or happening to a friend is universal. So it doesn't matter we're in Tennessee and cover Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. Reach out to us uh, by email, by website, by telephone, by text message, carrier pigeon, you name it, and begin the conversation of this is happening and what do you think? What can I do? So reach out to someone. We don't have to be in the same state or the same country for that matter. If you've got Google Translate, we're good. But reach out to someone and begin the conversation. And that can look any way a person would like it to look. We're not overpowering. We don't force. We just want to help where we can.
And that website is alztennessee.org, alztennessee.org. Do you want to throw out the phone number as well if anyone wants to just call?
Yes, we'll do call and text. So we'll give our mobile number. It's 423-330-4532.
Awesome. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
I think
you.
I think this was so valuable and I think people are going to get so much from it. Thank you for tuning in to this special edition of the Safe Money Retirement Show. If you or anyone that you know is starting to show signs of dementia, don't wait. Okay, I've been through it. My wife's been through it. Tracy's obviously been through it with hundreds of families. Don't wait. Get the help that you need now. It's out there. Go to alztennessee.org. Go to your local societies or chapters or organizations or whatever and get the help that you need and get it now. Make sure that you stay tuned. We've got more great interviews coming. And if you don't already have a copy of my book, just give us a call and we'll give you a copy of the book. We do talk about this in the book as well. So stay tuned. Thank you for being with us. Take care.